As defined in an old Greek movie, the true meaning of geffy is that desire left over after pain and sorrow. It's that outburst that turns into a smile, a song, or a dance. Kéfi is when you enjoy life in a holistic way and accept things you can't control but still find meaning in them. And sometimes, Kéfi is even stronger when life is tough, when you're grateful for the full spectrum of your emotions. Life is full of such contrasting moments, and that's what we talk about in the Kéfi podcast. Welcome, Thabiso, to this very new and young podcast. To us two young fellas having a little chat about life.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for inviting me to come and talk to you. I've been I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, same. I'm really happy that that you were able to take this invitation on such a short notice. So you are in Chicago right now and enjoying all the action that's going on in America. In terms of obviously the elections, probably they will be over when this podcast is airing. But but at the same time, obviously you have to deal, just like most other Americans do, with everything that's going on with the virus. Means everybody has to keep their distance, and I'm not sure how good is Chicago with masks. What would you say?
It's probably better than most of America. I luckily haven't had to go out, quite as much as maybe other people do. But I was sort of in between New York and Chicago, and driving from New York to Chicago, a lot of the places I stopped on the way, basically no one was wearing a mask, and so that was bad. But people here wear them.
So how has it been for you, the entire distancing situation? Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting. I think over the last few years, I had just kind of, at least just my own habits in general. I wasn't going out as much as maybe I used to a few years ago, but I kind of developed a routine where I was pretty comfortable being at home most of the time. So it initially wasn't too much of an impact to my sort of normal daily life. Obviously, outside of like going to work, being in studio somewhere, but just staying home was fine. But I think after a few months, it start getting a little stir crazy, because it's like you can't visit good friends, and I can't I'd like to go to a bar every now and then and hang out with people, and it's like, oh yeah, that option just isn't on the table anymore. And so I had to try and figure out new stuff to do with that when I'm getting in those moods.
Like what?
Like what is a good question. So most of what's happened is that I've been going back to either hobbies that I had when I was younger, when I had a lot more free time, and trying to sort of pick those up again. Like I recently picked up a clarinet, because I used to play clarinet a long time ago. So I bought one, and I was like, all right, let me learn how to play this again. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just been like, okay, well, I've got extra free time, so maybe I'll pick up more work and try to be productive that way.
But you're playing the clarinet just by yourself, or are you in some kind of... Do you play in a band, maybe online even? Because, that's becoming a thing.
Oh, yeah, that is a thing. I just was never... I don't think I'd be good enough to play with people at the stage I'm at, because I'm literally just learning how to play it again. But
okay.
Yeah.
Not good enough. That's something that we hear very often from artists, right? Like, I'm just not good enough. And then I probably hear you play the first time, and that you just fucking rock it.
I hope so.
Yeah. For those who are not sure or who don't know you exactly, could you probably tell a bit about yourself, like what you're doing, where you're working?
So right now I'm a concept artist at High Voltage Software here in Illinois. Do sort of third party development outsourcing for a few companies. Before that, I was at Six More Vodka, working with that awesome team there. And I think that probably is my first real sort of recognizable industry job. Before then, I was working in slot machines, which is adjacent but kind of a different industry on its own. Yeah, so I think probably where most people know me from is just sort of having random artist friends around, and then I, for maybe a good year, was posting stuff online very very often. So I
Yeah.
think I had a unique enough name that people were like, "Oh, who's that guy?" Yeah,
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
yeah, yeah. It's a
It's
good
kind of,
marketing tool.
it's the unknown name club that we're in, and
Yeah.
it certainly doesn't need any artist name if you have one of these. Um, since we're talking about work-life balance, of course, I would like to find out how you tackle that topic personally. Um, I mean, you kind of started telling us a bit about that, but I mean, you lived in Berlin for how long?
Uh, Roughly a year, approaching a year.
A year. How was that for you? I mean, did you leave friends behind, and you had to make new ones? And how did you deal with that situation?
Yeah. So I think I'm pretty lucky in the regard that well, I mean, it's there's a give and take, but so I emigrated from Zimbabwe to the US at a very young age, and even before that happened, I would travel often because of my dad's work. And so I got very used to going new places and having to sort of meet new people and rebuild my social life or social structure. Um, and so like I got pretty good at sort of being the odd one out or being new in some space. So going to Berlin was actually pretty easy for me, and in some ways it's like more familiar for me to be somewhere I've never been before and be around people I don't really know. Because it's always exciting, it's cool meeting new people and having to sort of figure out what's different about the new place you are and what you can bring from your past experiences and what you can pick up and how that will push you forward. So that was really cool. I liked I really liked living in Berlin. Um, I obviously at some point maybe want to go back, but who knows?
Oh, really? So you liked it that much?
Yeah, yeah. I There are very few places I've lived that I didn't, develop a soft spot for, because I think anywhere in the world you're gonna find awesome people. You're gonna find interesting people and just like different ways of life and interesting just ideas about how to live that are, like once you can sort of internalize them and adopt them, you kind of get it. Like you go somewhere and you begin to understand people, and living there gets a lot easier.
From the top of my head, I could tell you right away like three cities where you certainly won't find anyone who you could connect with. But
uh
that's a different story.
Listen, it's a challenge. I
Yeah.
I would try it. I would try it.
No, you won't. No. But what was it that you liked about Berlin? Was something easier there, or was something more challenging and though more interesting? What was harder in I mean, the contrast is I mean, I've been told it's kind of a culture shock to go from the United States to Berlin. So how was it for you?
I think that's part of the benefit I had, because I constantly felt like I was in culture shock in the US from the time I moved there.
Okay.
So that was kind of my default state of being. Because even regionally, because like I moved from Zimbabwe to New York, and that was a big change. But then I moved from New York City out of the city to like the suburbs, and that was a big change. And then I moved from there to the Midwest, and that was another change. The US is like 5 different countries. So
Yeah.
when you move around enough, you really, there's a lot of big differences between the various places. So when it came time to move to Berlin, I was kind of ready for that feeling. And I think also one of the benefits is that there are a few things about just Europe in general that are more in line with sort of the way I grew up in Zimbabwe. So there's like this weird, like, a lot of stuff in the US that I was used to, and but never really clicked with me. But then I got to Berlin and I was like, oh, this is just like, back home. And I think one of the good things about Berlin, I think Berlin is kind of easy mode for foreign people moving to Germany, because
compared to other cities, yes, it is.
Oh yeah, because it's, a lot of people speak English, and then so many people aren't even German themselves. So you just meet a lot of people who are kind of in the same boat as you, who are also just like new to the city, and it just makes it really easier.
Yeah, I mean, then you when you were at Six More Vodka, you had people there who weren't really fluent in German anyway, right?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like no one was German in the studio really. So, but yeah, basically everyone was from somewhere else, whether it's, Hong Kong, the US, the UK, Italy. Yeah.
Before you went to Six More Vodka, you said you were working on slot machines, so you didn't have the freelance experience, like the freelance experience. Sounds like the girlfriend experience or something, but I mean, but you didn't live the freelance life at some point, or?
I did, but very briefly. It was like a year, but also not in game development. Basically, what happened was, I finished university and then I got a job in Chicago doing slots, but then I ended up getting laid off, as many people who work in the industry probably have had the experience. And so from then on, like I didn't really have that much in the way of skills, but I was able to pick up some freelance here and there. And one of the more consistent things I was doing was doing storyboarding for advertisement, which was a very different and interesting experience.
I'm not sure if I'm hearing any sarcasm now, or if you're for real. I really can't tell.
Well, actually, I think it was useful. I think all of the sort of art jobs I did outside of sort of gaming, but still using my art skills, I learned a lot just about the way people think, and just sort of the way different professional sort of industries handle the creative process, but also just communication and how they deal with each other. The thing that was interesting about the storyboarding was that they basically owned you when you were on a contract. It's just kind of like, all right,
okay,
we got you for these 3 days. And so it's like, oh no, they really got me for these 3 days. It's like, I'm not leaving this place.
and in terms of probably at some point going back to freelance, I mean, you went from one studio job to the other. Is this something that you prefer, or would you say that it's still interesting to you to go back to freelance at some point?
I think the nice thing about the studio jobs for me has always been just sort of having a structure where I know, like, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. I can plan sort of a lot more of my year, or my just my time in general. Just knowing that, okay, I can go to work and have whatever tasks I have, get them done, and then come home and then, do other things and not sort of have that pressure of like, oh, am I using my time right now to keep myself afloat, that sort of thing. And I think part of that is because at that time, I was just out of school. Like I didn't really have the connections or just the consistent work to be able to sustain myself in like a really good way without constantly pushing. So maybe at some point it would be better for me. I know right now, like I've picked up some more freelance stuff, and I'm just kind of like, oh, like if I got enough of these kinds of jobs, I would be able to sustain myself sort of at the same level, but be much more free with my time. So at some point, it might be a nice move to go back.
So when you're talking about the pressure of this situation, is this something that what you would say you deal good with this, or rather bad?
I think I deal well with pressure in general, just because I I was talking with my mother about it actually recently, where she said that I have a tendency of just sort of locking into a just like a sort of robotic kind of, you just go quiet and just work on whatever is going on. Yeah, like when I get flustered, I just kind of like retreat, like the emotion disappears from my face.
So highly focused and all that. Oh.
Yeah, like there's a sort of high function mode that happens.
Okay.
Which I think has benefited me in some situations, but maybe is not always the best. Yeah, I think I generally deal with it okay, but more recently I'm trying to avoid that kind of stress.
So what I'm trying to find out right now, and that might sound a bit odd, is where's the poop? Have you seen that show?
No, I have not. Where's the poop?
That's from How I Met Your Mother.
Okay.
Never mind. That was this. So right now I have the feeling of talking to someone who is very balanced, knows exactly what he wants, and you appear like someone who doesn't really get stressed at all. So you're on the bright side, right? Like you don't have that issue of dealing a lot with work-life balance. You have it.
Yeah, maybe, kind of. The way I would put it is that I definitely do feel sort of the stress of things as they happen, and I get like I'll have my good days and bad days.
Yeah, that's called being human, obviously.
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah. I think it's just that at a certain point, because actually in school, I ended up taking a year off of school because I burned out while I was in university, and there was like a good year where I was just sort of back home with my parents, working, not doing art, really, not doing anything art related, and kind of realigning my I don't know if there was any real, like I never really thought about exactly what was happening during that period of time, but basically I kind of got to a point where I was thinking to myself, it's been really hard. I was away from home. I was in my first like crazy Midwestern winter. It's dark all the time. It's cold, and in a new place. And I think I kind of realigned my thinking, and that I was like, okay, well, I'm in this new place, and I know that I want to be an artist and work professionally and do all this stuff. And I know sort of what I need to do to get there. And so like part of me was like, all right, my parents were telling me like, oh, you're never gonna make it as an artist. Not like that, but the obviously concerned parents thing, like what games?
Okay.
What do
yeah.
that whole thing. And I got it in my head that I was like, well, I don't think I'm an idiot, and I think I can do this.
I don't think I'm an idiot.
Yeah, I don't think I'm an idiot, and I think I can do this. So as long as I kind of stay focused on the like the thing, sort of eyes on the prize kind of thing, I should be fine, because there are lots of things that will happen and come and go sort of in my life that I can't really control. And so this is sort of the one thing that I feel like I can control. So whenever there are tough times or issues, it's like my my little sort of ball that I can roll around and be like, okay, yeah, it's doing what it's supposed to do, versus everything else. So I think it, for me, in some ways, it kind of becomes a therapy, and that helps me sort of avoid feeling too stressed, because I know that even when I'm not necessarily getting something done, or something just isn't quite good enough, I have the belief that I can get there, like just with enough time, and then I'll feel good about it also.
Positive attitude. Okay.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned therapy. So have you ever been to therapy?
Well, for the first time this year, actually, because one of the things I was encountering was, I was like, all right, as I've gotten more busy, and as I've moved around more, it's been harder to keep in touch with the people in my life that are kind of the that had been my now I'm realizing they were kind of my therapy. They were my human sounding board, the people I talk to when I feel certain ways and I don't feel like I need to dress up whatever I'm talking about, or make it look good, that sort of thing. So yeah, so finally I was like, you know what, I feel like that was something that's necessary, and so I did some sessions with a therapist that were pretty nice. Still continuing with those. It's been really helpful. I guarantee I like recommend it for everyone. I think everyone needs therapy.
You think everybody needs therapy?
Yeah. Of some kind, not necessarily like not necessarily like a professional, but just
yeah.
I think people need to take time to understand what they're feeling, why they're feeling it, and then sort of try to figure out if there are more healthy ways of thinking about whatever is going on in their life.
Yeah, like you mean like general mindfulness about oneself and meditation.
Yeah.
Is that something you do? Meditation?
On and off, yeah. I always like tell myself that I'm gonna do it every day, but it ends up just being once every now and then. So I haven't formed a habit like I'd want to, but it's actually pretty wild. It's the first few times I tried it, I didn't really feel any change or anything that was significant, but there were a few times where I sat down and meditated and just felt like really clear, and then I was just like, oh yeah, there's something to this, and it's probably something that requires more keeping up the habit, to build up some sort of long term.
And speaking about burning out, so how much was that part of your therapy? Do you think there was any part that needed to be, like how do you call it in English now? I'm missing the word again. Like, was there anything that you had to get back to talk about what happened during your burnout and during that time off that you needed?
Not so much. I think that sort of the burnout happened when I was still sort of figuring out what I wanted to do, more or less. I had a lot of doubts about, I guess, sort of who I wanted to be, so to speak, like professionally and personally, and what I cared about, and that sort of stuff. And so I think I was just kind of at that stage trying to do too much without having any real direction, and I sort of overburdened myself mentally, and so by the time now when I'm getting to doing the therapy, I think that part of things was more or less figured out. It's just kind of been more kind of general life stuff, because obviously everything can't be uh everything can't be, drawing characters and stuff like that. There are relationships to maintain with friends and family.
Yeah.
There all sorts of things that I think need to be figured out, or just to have a good sense about in yourself.
Is family something important to you?
Yeah. I mean, I had a unique kind of, let me not say unique because I'm sure it's like this for many people. But my situation with my family was that because my dad worked abroad starting from when I was very young, and then I have three sisters, and one much younger, but my two older sisters were in boarding school, and so there were long stretches of time where we all kind of lived in different spaces, and then that only expanded as time went on and we all got older, to the point where we're all in different countries most of the time, and so we weren't really in each other's presence as much, and so learning how to make good use of the little time we do have when we are sort of all together, and appreciating that has been good for me. But it's like I think as I got older, I started to appreciate that a lot more, because I think when I was younger, I was just like, no man, I don't need anyone. I'm just gonna go out. Everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah, and then in fact you really grow older, and then you realize, oh no, these idiots you grew up with, that's actually the people you want to hang out now.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it's also just because at a certain point I began to realize how much of who I am is influenced by who they are, and how much there is to learn, especially like with my parents. I every now and then I'll stop and think about, their life and where they've been and how they got to where they are. And I'm just like, oh my God, these are like some of the most impressive human beings I know. So it's like, why not learn from them? Why not? Yeah.
Let's learn from them. What makes what makes them very special to you when it comes to where they have been and how they got there?
Oh yeah. No, I mean, so they come from almost an entirely different world than I do. My dad, when he was when he was young, when he was a teenager or a young boy, he was like living out in the boonies, in the sticks in Zimbabwe, like herding goats for my grandmother. No running water, no electricity, none of that stuff. And then somehow ends up becoming a journalist, fighting in the independence war, becoming a lawyer, all this stuff. Seeing so much of the world. Same deal with my mother, becoming a professor, and just all these insane kind of like accomplishments given where they started, and then all the stuff they've had to deal with along the way. And so for me, it's like I doubt there's any problem that I've come across in my life that they haven't dealt with some similar form of it. So
and probably mastered it, right?
Yeah. And if not mastered it, just have a perspective that is probably useful. And a lot of that just comes from, as an artist, when you're learning how to do something, a lot of the times, you study whatever the real thing is in nature, but then also you study what other artists before you have done to solve a given problem. So why not apply that same logic to just life?
True. Yeah. Um. So since your parents, since you are right now at the point that your parents are inspiring you to to become more to be, I don't know, better, can I say that? um has there ever been like a time where you actually felt the pressure? I mean, especially, I know what you're talking about when it comes to this thing about, hey, Dad, I want to be an artist, and then you get the look.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt their inspiring life to be more of some kind of burden or pressure, like something you want to have to live up to?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I think that's always been kind of something that was in the back of my head, was just knowing how awesome and impressive they are, and just like, well, what's the parallel? Like, what can I do within my career that's ever gonna match that or reach that? And so I'd have all sorts of thoughts running through my head of like, oh my God, like these guys are gonna think I'm like an idiot, like I'm an embarrassment, like all this sort of stuff. That stuff is always kind of swirling around.
You still have that?
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't think I've ever gotten rid of that feeling. But what has been helpful for the most part was just sort of talking to them and understanding what their sort of perspective is on me and my siblings in general. And I think, and obviously this is something where I'm like, not everyone will have that same I'm lucky that my parents are around and will tell me these sorts of things, but they're like, it's clear to me that even though I have these feelings and feel this way, that their only goal for me is that they just want me to be happy and be able to sustain myself and feel good and feel accomplished and do what I need to do.
But probably also the idea of not making any mistakes because you don't know as much as they do, right? Because that's a parent thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think they don't expect perfection from us, because they know they've lived, they haven't been perfect, surely, in their lives in some way. So it's like, it's all sort of insecurity that I built up on myself, and I'm sure others do the same. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's like, when you understand, like, oh, okay, no, as long as I know they love me and want me to be happy, that feeling can sort of be there, but not drive things.
I think parents have this standard mindset about knowing children better than they do know themselves. That's an interesting. That's something that's building up over years. I mean, because we can't remember our childhood doesn't mean that our parents can't, right? So, in that sense, they really know you longer than you know yourself, and and everything that this is built on. And it's funny because when my parents always have been like that, like always this idea of knowing exactly what was going on in my head, but then at the same time being super surprised that I didn't do what they wanted. And that's a parent thing. And then now I'm a father, and I am absolutely sure that I know my child better than he knows himself. And the problem is, I am not sure how I can turn that off.
So, yeah, absolutely. No, I think it makes sense because, like you said, they've known their kids longer than the kid has known themselves. My mom will still tell me stories about stuff that happened where I'm just like, when was that? And she's like, oh, it was when you were 4. And I'm just like, what? Like, I don't. It's
the most embarrassing thing ever, and I remember it, and you don't. So
no, but it's like, it's I think it's super useful to sort of have that in mind, because I know they sort of have their ideas and their preconceptions about stuff that are based on, sort of that knowledge of knowing me, for my entire life, basically. And then, but also having the confidence to understand, like, okay, you guys, you do know me, I'm your kid, but there's also all these spaces in my life where you weren't there and it was just me. And I learned something that is maybe unique to my experience, because likewise, in the same way that, my parents have things they've encountered that, they could sort of tell me about and have a good amount of knowledge. The same thing can happen in the reverse, because, you're only a certain age once in your life, in a certain time, in a certain place. And it's going to be different for everybody, So I was a teenager in the United States, which is totally different from, their experience. And so there's always going to be different perspectives based on the times and the places that are, yeah.
So from my father, who is born and raised in Greece and was also basically, they also had goats, and he went to the mountains with them and stayed there for days and all that. Like it sounds pretty familiar what you're talking about right now. And the interesting part to me always is the fact that that's a quote that I saw in a movie, and I don't remember which one it is, but someone said that we never really know our fathers. And I was thinking, I was thinking about that for a long time, until I realized that the reason is because at first I thought it was because he didn't, that my father doesn't tell me enough of himself. But how the hell do you compress a person into sentences? Like there's an entire life that he lived without me being close to him and experiencing that. And obviously it's like just along the tip of the iceberg, right?
No, I mean, when you as a kid meet your parents, they've already lived so much of a life, and that only expands as you get older. I mean, it's like so like I have a younger sister who's 8 years younger than me, and it was really interesting for me that as I sort of got older and would spend time away from her, how much she sort of like grew and changed as a person just in like the span of like 3 or 4 years where maybe I wasn't living with her. And it was just like, oh my God, like that, imagining that same sort of experience over the course of like 20, 30 years.
Exactly.
Someone can be a completely different person than who they used to be. And you're never going to sort of understand all of that.
Yeah, but it took me, for example, I mean, probably others had this kind of epiphany much earlier, but it took me like over 30 years to realize that. And at some point, I also wondered, would I even have liked my father? What if he was a dick? Like, what if he was a total asshole? And it just changed over the time, But I mean, obviously that's not relevant, but I don't know what the hell he did and how he was to other people and all that. I mean, now he says he's always been great, but come on, it's my father.
Of course, yeah.
What's he gonna tell me?
I think it's like the classic journey for so many people is that when you're really small, your parents are heroes and everything about them is great.
Yeah.
And then when you get to your teens, your parents are villains and everything is terrible.
Yeah.
But then when you sort of enter your adulthood, a little bit more advanced, you realize they're just people, like, so.
It can be a shock because, real talk, at some point, I watched The Simpsons too often, and I noticed some kinds of parallels between my father and Homer Simpson, which I totally made up, obviously, because when my father came from work, he was just done, and he just wanted to like lay down and watch TV, right?
Yeah.
And I was always like, lazy, I was thinking like so lazy. And at some point I had an internship in his company, and I saw what he was doing. And I remember that, I think I was 14, but I absolutely remember that moment when I realized that he was standing at the same spot for over 8 hours and checking washing machines if they would tear something up. He took that like some a ball of cotton, and he was just wiping the inside of the washing machine, testing if there was like anything that could tear the clothes. And he did that. That task. I mean, next day maybe he had a different task, but it's basically what he was doing. He was just working. He was an immigrant, right?
Yeah.
And he checked this thing for 8 hours, and I was sobbing because I was a fucking idiot and thought that my father was anything close to lazy, and he was the exact opposite. He basically sacrificed his brain, you know.
Oh yeah. No, that's totally. I think there's so much. There's like so many cool things I think that happen as you sort of grow and begin to understand a bit more about just like other people and what's happening around you in the world.
Yeah.
Because I always used to like just be so confused. Like when my dad would come home and just sort of just like sit down, he had his chair that he would it's the same chair that he would sit in and just sort of like not do anything for it's like the same deal where he'd like come back and just sit down in the chair and like have a beer and watch like some basketball. You know, we're big New York Knicks fans in the house and whatnot. But like I had like never understood that until like I finally began working, and you know, after like those first few weeks or months where you still have that sort of fresh energy of like a new job and whatnot, and you know, when it starts getting like kind of taxing, and just like the first time I just sort of like sat down and just didn't want to move, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it. This is what was going on. It was years and years of this. You know, like,
I really remember that phase too. Like when I was a kid, and I was my father had me pretty late. Like I was the last of us three, and he was like really just sitting and kind of like thinking. And I went to him and I was like, "What are you doing?" Nothing. And I go, well, "What do you mean?"
Yeah. No, the you really begin to appreciate the ability to just not do anything. Just nothing. To sit down and just be like, all right, I'm going to sit here and not think about anything, not talk to anyone, just kind of like be in a space and not be, you know, overwhelmed. Yeah.
My schedule tells me I have to sit here for an hour and do nothing. And it's the thing I'm looking forward for the most like for the entire day.
Oh
Perfect.
My God. Yeah. It's golden. That period of time where you can just like not worry about anything. That's nothing. I think everyone needs that.
Let's call it meditation.
Yeah. And you know what? To be honest, that's kind of like what it is for so many people, because it's literally just that time in your day where you just flush everything and just, you know, you center yourself somehow. Yeah, no, I was reading somewhere that like for so many people that time is their drive to work. You know, if they have to drive a good amount of distance, as often happens in the US. So what started happening is that companies who have people who are working from home, they now have like apps that are like their time tracking is like modeling to mimic their commute. So it's like, you know, they get up in the morning, get ready and all this stuff. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this is when you would start your commute and when you'd get to work. So like in this period of time, just like, you know, maybe listen to the radio or something, and like, you know, don't work on anything. Just like think, do what you do when you're driving to work.
There are people who need something to tell them what to do during that time.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This reminds me on apps that tell you to drink.
I mean, that's the thing. Like if you have that kind of mindset, I don't know if you ever had the experience, because I used to do it all the time when I was in school still, where I would forget to eat because I was like so intent on working on something. And I would be working on something for like 16 hours. Like I'd just be sitting down and just like doing the same thing for like most of the day, and like getting up maybe once or twice to use the bathroom. But then when it's like done, I'm like, oh, you know, I have been in this same room for 16 hours. I haven't eaten anything. You know, it's like your body catches up and is like, oh my God, what are you doing? You know, like
Like you realize you have a body.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I can imagine for I'm sure for any number of reasons, people just need something to just be like, all right, hey, remember, drink water. Or
but isn't that the craziest thing? Like we're talking about our fathers, both like I don't know, living in the wild, right? Like taking care of goats and stuff, and we're like we forget to drink and eat.
Yeah, but you know what I think it is? I think it's just the nature of the work, you know, because when you're fucking herding goats through the bush somewhere, you get thirsty. Like you're gonna get thirsty, and it's very apparent because it's like physically strenuous activity. But I feel like for at least for me, like so much of my day is just spent sitting at a computer, and it's all happening inside my head. Like at this point, so much of the drawing is muscle memory. I'm not thinking specifically about what my hand is doing. It's just kind of like this weird autopilot once the ideas are set. And so like, because it's all this sort of meditative thing that's happening sort of really far away in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, it's almost like
projection.
Yeah. It's like I'm somewhere else, and then suddenly I get pulled back into my body, and I'm just like, whoa, okay, what's going on,
But is it then like, I mean, it's already weird that we're talking so much about that little aspect, but for me it's super interesting because if you haven't eaten for, what did you say, like 16 hours or whatever, like I don't even know if the number was real or if you were just making fun, but there's not a chance that you weren't hungry before these 16 hours. Is it like waking up and realizing why you are pissed that you're hangry or something? Or is it like you must be hungry? Did you snap out of it because you're hungry, or is it the other way around?
I think it's the other way around, because what usually happens, and I think 16 hours is probably accurate. I've had times where I was like deeply in something for that long, and what ends up happening is that there's just sort of this razor sharp, super intense focus where I'm like, I will know at a certain point that I'm hungry, but I'm able, like my brain is just like, okay, you're hungry, but that's not important right now. Like it very clearly is just like, sure, you're, whatever is going on, but we don't need to pay attention to that right now. There's something else that you're doing that needs doing.
Do you think that's one of the reasons how you can get burned out?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think what burns people out is, I think that's a let me not say like a finite resource, but that kind of focus takes a toll on you if you're always doing it. Because obviously you start to physically deteriorate, but then mentally as well. So my burnout was specifically in those sort of first 2 years of school, where I was, we had fairly long studio classes and whatnot, but what often happened was I was pulling, all-nighters. There were like days where I just didn't sleep, and I would do like 2 or 3 days at a time, and I was doing that maybe once or twice a month, and that stuff just sort of starts to add up, because then you're also not dealing with other things in your life that are happening. You're because you have relationships and friendships and all this other stuff that you're supposed to deal with. But if you're only locked in and focused on sort of just like doing nothing but whatever your artwork is, or whatever your work is, then you'll start to fall apart.
So the cure for that for you was when you burned out to do nothing, right?
Yeah, basically what happened, I just went home, and I was still working because obviously I like needed money and whatnot. But I wasn't really doing any art for nearly a year. It was maybe like 10 months or something like that. And I was just kind of living, like I was just kind of home with my mom and one of my sisters, and working, and then I'd go see my friends who were in town, would go out on the weekends and whatnot. Like I just kind of lived and didn't really focus too much on sort of trying to make more art and grind and that sort of thing. Um, and that really helped. I think that kind of saved me, because when I went back to school, I sort of reprioritized my my experience there, where I sort of looked at it and thought, you know what, I'm at the school I was at also specifically, I was like, I'm not really getting that much uh information that is, that I can't get anywhere else. And I don't want to, this is such a unique and special sort of time in my life. Like I don't want to waste it. So my main goal then at that point was I just wanted to enjoy the experience and sort of expand uh uh sort of who I was and sort of the world, my world, just sort of artistically, mentally, all the sort of stuff. So my focus sort of turned away from like, all right, let me, do nothing but figure drawings every day for like, 16 hours, to, hey, there's this cool like poetry class. Let me take that. I'm really interested in poetry. Or, you know, astronomy, or just sort of all these other, that's part of why I was lucky too. It wasn't just an art school. It was like a full university. So I had sort of other opportunities to explore things that weren't specifically art.
You mentioned that you just were with your family during that time. I'm for example, I never really talked with my parents about that aspect. I mean, my sister, my brother, they knew that I went to therapy lately because of the whole workaholic bullshit that was going on.
Yeah.
But how was it for you? Like, did you tell your parents what was going on, and did they know? I mean, or did your siblings know? Like, did you tell anyone in your family?
Yeah, I think one of my siblings knew, because this was my younger sister, who I was probably the closest with, and we sort of have the most similar experience. Um, and at that time, I tried to tell my parents and talk with them about it, but I think it's like there's a cultural thing there where they're just kind of like, it's not really a
Yes.
thing,
Yes.
our people don't get depressed or burned out or
Yeah. So
whatever.
maybe you're not hungry, or what's the problem? Like something like
Yeah, it's just like
that.
there were all sorts of like things that were just like, oh no, you're just not
Yeah.
focused enough, or maybe you need to
Mm.
go to church more, or just all these other things that are
Oh,
like,
nice. Okay.
yeah, and I was just like, mm, you guys aren't really listening. So this is
Mm.
one of those things that I guess I'll have to figure out myself.
Mm. And you
Yeah,
did.
yeah, which luckily I did. It's like I'm sure for a lot of people, it's like it's really tough to hear that from your parents, because especially at that age, I think they're probably the only people that you meet who like care as much about your feelings as you do.
Mm.
So
How old were you
yeah.
then, if I may ask?
Oh, I was 20. Yeah, I think I was
That,
20,
that that's a
19 or 20.
bad age to be burned out already. So young.
While it definitely shouldn't have happened when I was that age, I think it was good that it happened, because at least for me, because and I was able to figure it out, because now it's a lot easier for me to avoid that. Like I have had the experience and I know when I'm getting there, and I'm just like, nope, time to pull the plug on whatever it is that's going on right now, because I'm not going back to that.
Yeah. And you got therapy.
Yeah. Now I'm doing therapy. Now it's good times.
Yeah, it's something that keeps popping up when you talk online with people. I mean, this is how you talk right now with people, as we will know. Um, if you're having this conversation and people are finally starting to normalize therapy, that's just something that I personally am very happy about. But it's probably not only a cultural thing, as you mentioned, but also I think there's a difference with a generation too. And
Yeah, for sure.
I probably this will also go away. I remember that my mom went through chemo last year, for example. She's better now, but the thing is that we all told her that she really should see someone to process all that, because it was a shock and all that, right?
Yeah.
She went to one session. She's like, that's nothing for me. It's just,
yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's all you can ask anyone to do is to try, and if it doesn't work, fine.
Yeah, but I just like, I mean, my mother knows me probably better than I know her, but I mean, I can imagine exactly how she went there. She probably went there, didn't listen at all, didn't open at all.
Yeah.
She was just sitting there, and it was like, when is this fucking stuff over so I can tell my children that I tried? And
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I think a cool thing that at least I noticed with my parents at a certain point is that, you know, obviously as a kid, and I think it happens a lot more when you have siblings, is that as siblings you kind of figure out together where your parents' kind of shortcomings are as far as like communicating or like understanding what you're trying to sort of say to them, and then you sort of become each other's emotional support whenever like maybe your parents aren't able to understand whatever it is that's going on. You know, which that is a nice thing to kind of have. And so I think even if you maybe don't have siblings or whatever, I think people just find some friends, you know, like if you have close friends, keep them close and really try to build that relationship where you emotionally support each other, you know, really ask, you know, how they're doing, what's going on in their life, that sort of thing. And because it can really mean a lot, and it's hard to quantify, because it's you know, a lot of times friends will say stuff like, oh, hey, how are you doing? They'll ask and like, oh, you know, and like empathize, and it doesn't really mean anything, you know, it's just kind of conversation. But then every now and then you'll just be in a really like shitty place and they say something and you're just like, oh my God, you know, I'm so happy that this person is around, you know, like just to be there to help keep me sane.
I'm super happy that you joined this, Thabiso, and I hope that maybe at some point we will get to do this again.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.